the big reveal is going to be what these Tic Tac looking objects are. They've now been shown on mainstream media, New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, CNN. Everybody's now covering mainstream. It used to be relegated to coast AM, and now this has hit mainstream thanks to this video that was released about a year ago. And you're going to reveal on the Hidden Truth Show for the first time exactly what these things are.
Correct.
But let's start with how Mike Turber is in position to know the answer to that question.
Well, back a long time ago, I was working on what's called magnetic anomaly detection. That basically is a device that can track objects moving through whatever medium, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's air or water, and we were using that to track submarines. And that's when a lot of the tracking of submarines moved from sonobuoys to actual aircraft flying over and being able to track submarines underwater without actually having to drop a sonobuoy or have a sonar, because sonar is loud underwater. You're basically pinging, this noise goes out and the reflection comes back, and if it's a metal reflection, you'll know it. If it's just an underwater object or a whale or something, you'll know that too, a soft object. So magnetic anomaly detection, which is MAD, is what they utilize primarily to this day to track submarines. So what was happening was the Soviets were trying to determine or to build submarines that would get around that. So they were going quiet. Everybody remembers the movie Hunt for Red October. That movie was basically based on a lot of real technology that was being looked at back then. Tom Clancy actually was given unprecedented access to certain material that allowed him to expand that book to cover some of that new technology that was back in the 80s, whenever the Hunt for Red October came out. I can't remember the year. But some of that information was real. And to this day, some of that technology is still being utilized by both us and the Soviets. They have the fastest craft underwater when it comes to submarines. They also have the fastest torpedoes, kind of. But
why do they have faster submarines and torpedoes than we do?
Well, they just developed that technology a little bit more. We didn't. For us, speed wasn't necessarily what you needed to have to go to war. You needed more missiles on board. You needed to have your ship be able to be more responsive, stay underwater longer. 100% of the U.S. Navy's submarines are all nuclear powered. We don't have a diesel generator or diesel powered submarine, so they could stay underwater for years if there's enough food and whatever, and they come up and snorkel the air if need be, or turn the breathers on and cycle the air.
So, and you said that you utilize this technology, the MAD.
Yeah,
technology.
That's what I was trained on, and then.
And what was your position at the time?
Back when I told you before, I was electronic intelligence operations. And when I worked in which the old code was 20530, 20550, and 20570. It's basically the last two numbers giving you a different level of like up to superintendent.
And this is with Army?
Air Force.
Air Force.
Air Force. But I quickly got out of that. I was recruited into other places, and I started working on different projects after that. It was quickly the reason why I come across so much different information, which borderlines bizarre after a certain point. It's like how much can Mike possibly know about all these different subjects? And basically, it's because I was bounced around quite a bit. I was put into different areas because I had different skill sets that allowed me to work in different areas and basically meld into whatever they needed me to be at that time. And a lot of times information would come my way, and I would see it, and I have a very good memory, and I would remember it. And if necessary down the road, I could recall it, which is why I'm here with no notes or anything like that.
And by the way, was MAD at the time considered some type of super secret technology?
No, MAD wasn't, but there was some other underlying technology that was behind it that was not readily known. The Earth's magnetic field had been completely mapped, and any time an object would move through it, they were trying to move MAD from an aircraft to a satellite. And essentially, they're trying to remove everything to satellites. Because
is it now satellite?
I'm not going to answer that one, but we'll just say that most likely the case is that platform has been moved. But MAD is still used to this day in like different aircraft. The Navy has, Air Force has, so yeah, it's still utilized.
Okay, so you're utilizing that technology, and that leads into
That kind of led me. It actually leads me away from it for a while. For a long time, I was out of that mix. I wasn't in the Air Force anymore. I was doing contracts, various things. I would be called in to perform certain tasks. And one of the this is kind of weird. This is going to kind of mix into something else. One of the tasks I was mixed into was to utilize information resources that were put to me for a roundtable meeting. We'd sit around and we would basically brainstorm and try to figure out ways to make things work better, function better. And I found myself being able to do that quite well. I would go into a facility, I would test their security, I would test whether it was their didn't matter if it was electronic security or human security, whatever it was. I was able to manipulate myself or the objects around me or things around me to get me to where I needed to go. It's basically penetration testing. So I found myself being an expert at penetration testing, which is going into a facility, going from point A to point Z without anybody finding me or knowing what I was doing and then gathering whatever it was. It's kind of like a capture the flag thing. You go in and get a file, you come out, and if you're able to come out with that file, you win. And they lose, and they often lost. I was pretty good at it.
Okay. And then?
and then where do we go from there? Fast forward to 2004. I came across a little batch of, actually 2005, I came across a batch of information when I was actually looking at something completely irrelevant to what is commonly referred to as Tic Tac now. It was basically some comm links that were some data bricks were brought into a certain facility and being analyzed, and the analyzation of those was kind of a curiosity to me and someone else that I knew at the time I won't throw them under the bus, but they ran a few ideas past me and said, hey, this is something I ran up against. What the hell is it? And so I started looking at, or not looking at, the actual information at the time. It was just somebody telling me about it, and I didn't know really what it was at the time. As time progressed, I found myself becoming more and more interested in it. I've always been interested in UFOs, aerial phenomena of various sources, or anything off the wall. But I'm known as a non-conspiracy theorist. I'm known as a debunker. So generally, I would be challenged to look at something and either debunk it or confirm it. And that was kind of, I guess that's when the Navy, or the Department of Defense hired Louis, what's his last name? Elizondo. I keep forgetting his last name. Louis Elizondo to come in. They paid him $20-some-odd million to come in to perform that.
Yeah, it was an act of Congress. Mm-hmm. Supposedly it came out of Harry Reid's office.
Yeah.
And it was a total budget, I think, of $28 million over X number of years to examine.
Yeah, and going through Harry Reid's office was probably a mistake because the media tried to put this information out back in December of 2017. It basically fell flat. The reason why it fell flat is because the mainstream media was trying to politicize what was going on based on the fact that it came through Harry Reid's office. If it would have went any other way, then the information that was put out to the mainstream media probably would have took traction, and we would probably have Are you
talking about the Tic Tac videos?
I'm talking about the videos. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, Lewis, when he put that information out there, he's basically a whistleblower, but at the same time, the DoD blew their own whistle because they confirmed what everything said and put the information out.
Right. But he didn't actually put it out until after he had left his position.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yeah. They basically shut it down. Their excuse was that it's only $25 million. That's really nothing when you look at the military budget to do the job he was doing. But essentially, they hired him, I guess, in effect, to come in and do what I would have done, which is come in and figure out what these things are and see if he could figure out what they are. And that's where we lead up to the situation that happened with the Nimitz off the coast of San Diego down here.
Mm-hmm. So, well, what was this? You said at some point, I was going to point out something, and I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I was reading when they were talking about this allocation of money that was given to, as a result of the Harry Reid bill, that there's a guy named Robert Bigelow, a billionaire entrepreneur and longtime friend of Mr. Reid, received most of the money allocated for the Pentagon program. Do you know this? Have you heard this name?
Do I know who Bigelow is?
Yeah.
Of course I know who he is. Bigelow also, he also is a big supporter of Reid. He also put a bunch of money back into Reid's campaign. So that's where a lot of that. So I'm not a political person. I don't really care. But the story, my understanding, is that a lot of the money that went back to Bigelow's operations was funneled back to Reed in the form of some rather nice campaign contributions.
Shouldn't surprise any of us. Okay, going back to you said there was materials that you were told about or given back in 2005.
Early 2005, I was looking at comms communications between Navy data links that were going out to a cruiser group or a aircraft carrier group, which was the Nimitz. At the time when I first heard them, I actually was able to hear some of the communications go back and forth. I didn't know who I was listening to. But then when some numbers came up, I started putting two and two together and figured out what it was. And what was odd to me was the communications of what the pilots were describing. And I didn't get to see the video. I didn't see the FLIR or anything. I'm just listening to the comms and thinking that this is pretty bizarre. And someone was basically asking me, "What do you think this is?" And at the time, I thought, well, it could be out of this world, could be anything. I mean, the thing was open. But as soon as I was done with that, I started to think about it. And I started digging around. I started looking around and trying to figure out, okay, on my own, what this was. So for many years, it kind of lay dormant in the back of my mind. I didn't really think much of it. But in 2017, when it came back out and I got to see the video for the first time, then I went, oh, I remembered the comms, and those are the same comms I had heard back in 2005. I heard them again in 2015-ish from the Roosevelt off of Jacksonville. So I'm thinking, okay, now these must be linked somehow, some way, because they're describing somewhat similar objects, except the two objects are completely different. So I started digging and digging and digging, and I'm very...
You're talking about now in 17, once you've seen the video.
In 2015, 2017 I saw the video. That's when I put two and two together. But in 2015, I was able to come across some of the other comments from the Roosevelt. But 2017 is when I really started getting interested. After the videos come out, I said, wow, okay, let me figure out what this really is. And basically,
and at that point, you're freelance Mike. You're not working for the Air Force.
I wasn't working for the Air Force or anyone at that moment, and I still had access to. A lot of people wonder how I get a lot of the information I do, and well, we'll just leave that at that. But I do have ways of getting into areas to find information, and that's kind of what I did. What I stumbled across was a link between some colleges and universities that had developed some technology. And that technology was brought over to DARPA. It was turned into a DARPA project, and what's called a DARPA Hard. And it was basically...
And describe DARPA.
DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. DARPA is an organization that's basically ran by the military, ran by the government, to develop new technologies, to push the envelope of what people can do, what machines can do, what technology can do, in effect. Basically computers, whether it's humans, it doesn't matter what it is. They put humans inside of robot machines and run them around, and they've got some crazy things that are coming out.
Yeah, and I did a little bit of research on them and noted that they've got a website which lists all their projects on there, which I thought was kind of bizarre that they would publicly state what their projects are.
It is, and what's funny is you almost think it's becoming transparent. DARPA has a project called Open Catalog. And Open Catalog you can actually go into, and you can actually become a part of some of their projects and work on them and do whatever you want. As long as you have some skill set that they believe will be beneficial to them to learn or study from, or to watch how you respond to something. Like if a new technology comes out and I say, okay, Jim, what can you do with this? And not tell you a damn thing about it, and you just try to figure it out. And that's kind of what they do, but on a different scale. They scale that up a few notches, and the people that they're giving this stuff to, that's the open catalog. Well, naturally, if you have an open catalog, you also have a closed catalog, and that's where some of the projects get really interesting. That's when you're brought in to certain think tanks, and they have these projects that they call DARPA Hards, which basically is something that is either borderline impossible or some technology that doesn't exist yet, and they want to find out, okay, we want to be able to do this, we're capable of doing this, how do we get from here to here? That's effectively what happened. A couple of universities were simultaneously developing technology that would be borderline bizarre, and there's a couple individuals around the world that were making advances in certain technology areas which would take the weight of a object and greatly reduce the weight of the object. That was one part of the technology. Now, what do you do with that is a whole other thing. If your car, which weighs, say, 3,000 pounds, all of a sudden weighs 400 pounds, imagine how much gas you would save. Well, the other end of that is if you could take an aircraft and reduce its weight drastically, how far can you take that? And in the case of Tic Tac, obviously they took it to the extreme where they could actually take the weight of the aircraft and effectively make it zero. And that's essentially what we've done.
So the person that was telling you this is active U.S. military?
Back in the day it was, but after that was back in 2005 when I started that. But pretty much past that it was all me.
But I thought in 2005 you weren't sure what this was.
All I heard was the comms.
It wasn't until 17 you see the video and you start pursuing it a bit more.
Yeah.
With your current contacts,
Yeah.
and one of those contacts is able to share. Well, Mike, this is what it is.
Yeah,
It's technology that came from a university that went to DARPA and was turned into this.
Pretty close, but a lot more of it was basically me digging and putting two and two together. And eventually, after a certain period of time, you use Occam's razor. You're going to take the what makes sense now, and then piece that together. Now it makes sense, and now that the information that I saw over here, then I saw other information over here, and at the time I couldn't put the two together. Now I can put the two together, and I feel very confident that I'm 100% confident about what I'm about to tell you is factual. The thing is about the nuances between it, like what specific person ran a certain project or something like that. Probably won't know that information, but the main thing is there's a lot of guys out there that witnessed these objects, and they're looking for answers. They want to know, what the hell were these things? Were they extraterrestrial? Were they terrestrial? Were they advanced technology? What the hell was this? No one's giving them answers, and they know that their commanders probably know what's going on, but they were like guinea pigs in a big experiment, and that's effectively what it was. The whole thing with the Tic Tac, which I guess we're about to get into. The Tic Tac event, which dates back to November of 2014 or 2004.
USS Nimitz incident off of San Diego.
Yeah, the Nimitz incident off San Diego. That incident happened about 90 or 100 miles off the coast of Baja, more or less, a little bit more south of San Diego. That incident, what happened then was a lot of objects were being tracked. And at first, no one really paid much attention to them, or they paid attention to them because they were obviously flying near an active, Navy operation. They were getting ready to go on a cruise, so this was their workup to their final workup to their actual cruise. So this is like their most important time for them. So a lot of the training missions were going out, and they just happened to have planes in the air at the time that these objects were tracking. So they sent two F-18s, F-18 Super Hornets, over to track these objects, and they got a visual on the objects finally, but they weren't able to track them on radar. Now the Princeton, which is the main ship that's involved in this whole process, the Princeton has what's called Spy 1 Bravo radar, and that's a phased array type radar, which means it can actively track 100, probably, we'll say more than 100 objects, but we'll just say 100 objects at any one time without actually sending out a radar signature. It's actually able to track these objects in real time in 3D space pretty much without the need for waiting for a signature to come back. In other words, you don't have some spinning radar going around and you have to wait for the next sweep to find out where this craft's going. They can track an object live, which is how they were able to track the objects moving from point A to point B at ridiculous speeds, and still know that is the same object. It wasn't an object appearing here and then another object appearing here. They could actually track the movement of the object. The movement of the object, however, was so bizarre and so erratic that they had no clue what they were looking at. And that's true. The people that were in the CIC, which is your Combat Information Center, they were watching these objects and they were getting the data coming from the WIZOs, the WSO officers in the back of the plane and the E-2 Hawkeyes, sending that data back, and it became bizarre. The problem is with the phased array radar that's on the Princeton, it could track them, but the radar that was on the Super Hornets pretty much couldn't track them. And the same thing with the U-2 Hawkeye, which both use the older type radar, which has to sweep around and make a sweep. So these objects were virtually invisible, but not to the Princeton. And that's key here. That's key to figure out why this happened this way.
Sorry, why would they be invisible to the radar being used by the planes, by the Hawkeyes?
The technology that's utilized in Tic Tac is made specifically to bypass almost all types of radar. The only radar it's going to have a problem with is phased array radar, which is what happens on Aegis type cruiser, which is what the Princeton is. So the Princeton has a super advanced, it's called Spy 1 radar, phased array radar, and it's able to track these objects back then. Now, whether or not it can do it today with the new technology that they have now, maybe, maybe not. Okay, because there's some other advancements that were made into the Tic Tac and what became the second generation, or not second generation, but a competing type of aircraft called gimbal. So the gimbal was the object that was located off the East Coast, off of Jacksonville, in 2015, I think it was.
Okay, so the F-18s couldn't track them on radar, but they had visual identification of them.
Visual identification, and then they got them on auto track. The pilot, the Wizzo can sit in the back and sit there and actually monitor everything that's going on. And once he was able to track an object, he can actually tell it, I want you to track this object that I'm looking at, and it can see it.
And all that video is available. We were just watching it before you came in, and there was the History Channel did the 6-part series on it, which has all this, at least what video has been released, you can see it. You're saying there was a lot more video than
there is a
released.
Ridiculous amount of video.
Well, let me ask you one question about the video, because one observation I had is like, gee, is this really the highest resolution video that these planes can shoot? Because you're looking at it and it's kind of like your fuzzy old UFO pictures.
Yeah, it's like your old Sasquatch and your Bigfoot pictures. Like, well, you guys go out there with the worst possible cameras. It's like they grab them off.
My iPhone would have done a better job.
Yeah, it's like you're waiting. They grab the cameras off the tables and they run out and start taking pictures of Bigfoot. But yeah, that seems to be the ongoing thing with UFO pictures and video. Is that it's hard. It is actually hard to take a picture of an object that's moving that fast at that far.
Well, but it was hovering at various times.
Yeah. Well, the video that actually is out there is much clearer than what you're seeing, and that I can tell you for utmost assurity.
You're saying that what we're seeing is a much lower res version of the real video.
100%, absolutely. That's fact.
Because you've seen the types of videos that F-18s can shoot.
Yeah, and you can actually just anyone can look up these videos and realize that the resolution that was released on those videos was subpar.
Although I will say, so we were watching the Rogan show just before you came in, and that was the pilot's Farver, is that his name? Fravor.
Yeah, that was the lead.
Did you see Rogan? Did you see him on Rogan by chance?
Mm-mm.
So anyway, one of the pilots was on Rogan just a couple weeks ago, and he went through the video with Rogan, but he never said, "Oh, and by the way, Joe, this video sucks. The real video is a lot better." At least
he also said that this was all there was to it, which is not what I had heard. He said there's rumors that there's more of it, but
more video.
Well, I don't know where that would come from, but there's quite a bit more video. That whole event. Keep in mind, once those planes are in the air, those sensors are on, and everything is on at that time. Now, the actual video part may be a little bit lower, but they were getting easily 10 to 15 minutes of video of that event. That one event has to have much more video. And some of the video may be just them looking for the object, and also what we don't see is the actual video of the subsurface water disturbance that occurred. Right. We don't see the actual video of that, but that's on video. So they have the forward-looking infrared, which is the FLIR, and then the pod that's on the plane has much higher resolution than what we saw.
So, going back to how you know this, how do you know it, and not everybody else?
Well, I started delving into other technologies a long time ago. Back when I was still privy to certain pieces of information, I would venture out a little bit and take a look at some other things that were going on. And of course, when you're bouncing around from one place to another, you see something under a tarp, and you know if no one's looking, you go kind of look, and you wonder what these things are. There's a lot of these objects, which we're going to get into where they're made, basically who makes them, whether it's terrestrial or extraterrestrial or not. What's important to know is that the technology that they use is not that far advanced that it's not possible. Okay, so a lot of people, they take something that they don't understand, and immediately it becomes something that it's not. It's, as far as they start bouncing extraterrestrial objects coming to the planet to mess around with the Navy for some reason. That's not the case here. As far as my ability to find this information, it was essentially me just delving around in certain areas, and a byproduct of looking in one place is that either A, you'll see some other things that you otherwise wouldn't see. And under normal circumstances, I would not even be discussing this. But it's becoming apparent that either the Department of Defense wants this information out because they did put out those videos. They didn't have to. They could have just said that Lewis was a whack job, and we fired him, and he we're not going to pay him any more money. He came in here and he thinks they're this or that. That wasn't the case. So the DoD actually put out the videos, which essentially, and now what they did do was they lied and said that they didn't know what the objects were. Of course, they know what the objects are, because if these objects were doing what they were doing, dancing around the Nimitz and the Roosevelt at opportune times when both are trying to work on training missions. If you look at the odd timing of this, it wasn't during combat. It was during training missions. So they were basically, in a nutshell, this is the Air Force screwing with the Navy.
By the way, we did learn in that Rogan video that I'm sure you already know that they don't put any live ammo on planes when they're in training.
No,
to
the rails
shooting down one of our own planes.
Right, the rails aren't hot. Yeah, the rails aren't hot.
So it isn't theoretically dangerous to do what the Air Force did to screw around close to Navy training exercises.
Not at all. Not at all. And these objects were tracking out of San Clemente and out of what are the other islands are Catalina. So they kind of bounced out from that area, and they were flying at relatively normal speeds, 5 to 10 in a group. There's a lot. There's more Tic Tacs than people think, but the one that we see, the guy captured on auto track is, you have ones called Go Fast, and you have ones called Gimbal, and you have the ones the Tic Tac. But the objects that you're looking at, especially when let's just stay with the Nimitz for now, just so we don't confuse everybody. The technology back then, they didn't have the technology back then to cloak this type of object. And I don't mean cloak like Star Trek where the Klingon battlecruiser comes in and all of a sudden you can't see it anymore, but it's pretty damn close to that. Back then, they didn't have that technology. Well, now they do.
They meaning
the United States Air Force. They do have that ability to do that.
And that's what you have learned, is that those Tic Tac objects that we see in the 2004 USS Nimitz video is actually technology of the U.S. Air Force.
Correct.
That the U.S. Navy was not privy to.
That the Navy personnel that were out on their training missions, and basically, if you're going to test your technology, you're not going to test your technology. You're not going to go fly it over to China and fly it over to Russia and just play around with them to see if your technology works. The way you're going to test your technology is on yourself first. You're going to say, okay, let's test this. We've got a training group that's out here in San Diego. These birds are ready to fly. Let's fly these birds around the Nimitz and see how our people respond to it, because our people are going to respond to it in a similar fashion to how the Russians and the Chinese or Koreans or whoever is going to respond to it. So effectively, that's what you're doing. You're going to test your technology, test it on yourself. That way, if it is found out or something screws up and something goes wrong, then you can just write it off and just say, yeah, well, we were testing something and it obviously didn't work.
Okay, so and what is the source of your information that this is U.S. Air Force technology?
Nice try.
Broadly speaking.
Essentially the projects were brought over from 2 colleges and a couple of universities, we'll just say.
But sorry, what I mean broadly speaking, meaning someone in the active U.S. military has confirmed to you, Mike, this is what it is.
I confirmed it without asking anyone.
Okay.
We'll put it that way. So
I
came across the information early on in 2005. In early 2005, someone brought me the comms. I got to listen to the comms.
That time you had no idea what it was.
Yeah, and that was on the list of personnel. It wasn't like a high-ranking official or nothing like that. It was just another guy basically around the same ranking that I would have had if I would have still been in. And they would have said, hey, what the hell do you think about this stuff? And he stumbled across it and said, what do you think? And we listened to it, and he didn't have the video either. It was just the comms. So that's what we had back then. So that individual is a low-ranking individual, not somebody that came to me to confirm anything. It was just both of us trying to figure out what the hell we were listening to. Move forward, in searching for other things, I tend to stumble across various pieces of information. When I do, I try to put the two together and try to figure out, okay, where did this come from? So I'm pretty good at tracking information that I receive to verify it, to go back and go, okay, where did this come from? what does it mean? What is the source? Where does it go from here? And did I cover my tracks, making certain that no one knew that I found it? So that was the thing. So doing penetration testing allows me to actually do just that. I go in, I find stuff, and I report to whoever is asking me to do it. If you pay me, let's say this building here had a elaborate network, and you have a bunch of attorneys working in here. So the attorneys would hire me to come in and basically say, okay, we want you to find this file. This file exists somewhere in this building on someone's computer somehow, some way, come find it. And they would pay me large sum of money to come in and try to find it, whether it's through hacking or just walking in the door and asking for it. Some of the technology necessary to acquire this information is unbelievably low technology. It's like literally just walking in the door and asking for something and someone actually handing it to you, and that's when it gets pretty scary.
So I'm trying to distinguish between it being your belief that this is U.S. Air Force technology versus knowing for fact that it's U.S. Air Force
I have
technology.
zero doubt. And I know you want to go where obviously you want to verify, and anyone watching this or hearing this is going to wonder, how in the hell do we believe this guy? Who the hell is he to have this information? It doesn't matter at this point. What will matter is that when it comes out, it'll be verified and vindicated when the Air Force or whoever shows its technology, because the technology is coming out. They apparently want people to know about it because they released it back in December 2017. They released it again back during the Area 51 event, which happened just a month or two ago. So they tried to push it out again, and the mainstream media didn't really bite on it. The bigger issue back when they first put it out was because of the Harry Reid problem with the Bigelow problem that they politicized. If you look at the old CNN footage, you'll see that instead of talking about this amazing advanced technology that you've just seen and witnessed, they're talking about whether or not Harry Reid received contributions from Bigelow. Who gives a shit, really, when it comes down to it? I'm more interested in the technology. I don't care if you put $20,000 in his pocket. I don't care. This is technology here that obviously is amazing. When you have an aircraft that's capable of going 24,000 miles an hour in 0.78 seconds, that's pretty cool stuff. That's concerning to a lot of people, namely our enemies. So they're going to wonder how we can do that. If we can put an object on station anywhere in the world that fast, then that would make the other country probably perk up and go, wow.
So DOD has certainly released some videos. They've confirmed that the videos are accurate. These are, in fact, videos taken by our pilots. They did, in fact, encounter unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't gone so far as to say in any way that this is U.S. technology. They said that we don't know what it was. So why are you saying that you think the Department of Defense is about to share with the world what this really is?
I don't think they're going to share it. I think the problem stems from the fact that this was originally civilian technology. Okay, this was not military technology to begin with. Now, the military put it together and actually has the money to physically make the objects that we utilize the technology. The difference is the universities that were getting funding, where they were getting their funding from, I don't know. But they were getting funding to advance this research, and then once it got to a certain level to where it was viable, then it was pulled into DARPA, and DARPA took over at that point.
Do you know what universities they were?
I know one of them.
Can you say it?
I might be able to say it.
Okay.
It starts with the letter D.
D. Dartmouth.
No, Dundee.
Huh?
Dundee.
Dundee.
Mm-hmm.
Dundee University?
Yeah, that's
Where's that?
one. Hell if I know. I just
Okay, and what year are we talking about? That way they would have shared this with DARPA.
Here's the funny thing. Some of the technology that's involved in these craft actually extend back to 50s and 60s, and even before that. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking what effectively is angular motion and you're trying to turn it into linear motion. And the term anti-gravity is going to be brought up because that's the only term that would actually make sense. So if you can take an object that can withstand gravity and effectively become weightless and move through the air at ridiculous speeds without producing a sonic boom, okay, above water and below water. Now, this object can move below water at over 500 miles an hour. If it can move above water at a recorded speed at over 24,000 miles an hour, you're looking at an object that can actually escape the Earth's gravitational pull and leave the system if necessary. If the craft can actually do that or not, I don't know. Okay, what I do know is the craft can move through the air at ridiculous speeds, and it can move below water also at ridiculous speeds.
Yeah, so we've been reading up on this, and it does seem like for many decades there's been a lot of talk about defying gravity and Einstein's theory, and that it certainly is possible to defy it, but it's a matter of actually implementing.
Yeah, the implementation of it is the hard part. Essentially, if you take an object, and if the first obstacle is to remove the object's weight, which is obviously the gravitational effect on the object. Once you get the object's weight to weigh nothing, then you're going to say, okay, now that we have it weighing nothing, what do we do with it now? We have to move it. So what is the actual propulsion that's behind the craft? What's making it move at ridiculous speeds? You're still taking an object that has mass and you're moving it, and you can't. You're basically bypassing not only gravity, but you're also totally destroying Newton's laws. For every action is equal opposite reaction, and object in motion tends to stay in motion. All these different laws that are basically thrown out the window, and that's effectively what you have.
So I read a lot about this on this patent that we found that you said that you've heard about but haven't seen before. It's a Navy patent.
Right.
There was a big article on thedrive.com by a couple guys that we're hopefully going to see if we can get on the show. But here's some stuff from that patent that seems to be talking about what we're talking about with these Tic Tacs. All matter contains energy on the quantum level. By theoretically creating its own incredibly dense and polarized energy field, the hybrid craft is claimed to be able to create a quantum vacuum around itself, which allows it to repel any air or water molecules with which it interacts. Thus, the craft can essentially ignore aerodynamic or hydrodynamic forces, and so it is claimed in the patent. And then there was an issue with getting the patent issued. The patent examiner was basically saying this isn't what you're describing isn't even possible by laws of physics.
Right.
So I can't grant this to you.
And basically a bogus patent.
Let's get to that in a second. Let me just finish with it. So the Chief Technology Officer of the U.S. Naval Aviation Enterprise, Dr. James Sheehy, personally vouched for the legitimacy of this beyond revolutionary aerospace technology in the Navy's appeal to the U.S. Patent Office. Sheehy assured the patent examiner in charge of this application that the aircraft propulsion method described in the patent is indeed possible, or will soon be, based on experiments and tests that the Navy had already conducted.
Right.
So does that mean Air Force was pursuing it over here and Navy's pursuing it over here?
Well, the Navy obviously is going to utilize this technology as well. The thing about it is all the commanders of that carrier group, they knew what was going on. Okay, if you have all these aircraft that are just appearing out of virtually nowhere and bouncing around, your ships at will, then there's a certain point where the commanders are going to go, all right, we're going weapons hot. Let's start taking these things out because this is obviously an issue.
And they seem comfortable sending their pilots out there to investigate this without weapons.
Yeah, their loadout was nothing. So when these planes are flying out, they have zero loadout when it comes to anything that are weapons. And then you had even a trainee. I think the one on the other Super Hornet was a new female pilot or something, or maybe it was a Wizzo. I'm not sure. But the thing about the Nimitz event or encounter, I think there's a documentary called Nimitz Encounter. We can call it that. It's a better title. That was a demonstration of technology from the Air Force to the Navy. What year was the patent?
Recent. Just issued in 2017, November.
Yeah, so the Air Force had it essentially first. I don't think the Air Force filed a patent on any of this stuff. But the technology there...
Yeah, which, by the way, you should not be able to get a patent for something that already is out there. So if this is describing what was going on in 2004, which sort of sounds like it is, then the patent should not have been issued, which tells you that the Patent Office wasn't aware that this had already been out there, which also raises the other question of what the heck are they doing filing for a patent anyway and disclosing this technology to everyone else, because this is on Google Patents.
Right.
And just one other thing I'll read for you and for the listeners, when you get to the actual claim of the patent, there's a lot of background information in it, which is really interesting. But bottom line, this is what they are claiming to patent, and this patent's been issued. a craft using an inertial mass reduction device comprising of an inner resonant cavity wall, an outer resonant cavity wall, the inner resonant cavity wall, and the outer resonant cavity wall forming a resonant cavity. And this is the way patents are written, and microwave emitters, such that the microwave emitters create high-frequency electromagnetic waves throughout the resonant cavity, causing the outer resonant cavity wall to vibrate in an accelerated mode and create a local polarized vacuum outside the outer resonant cavity wall.
Well, what that means in English is essentially they're doing what effectively is being done by supercavitation. Underwater, a object that moves through the water has a propeller behind it. Everyone's seen a boat, and no matter how you realize there's no air underwater, right? But as soon as you start turning a propeller underwater, you see bubbles coming out. Okay, so the bubbles are creating an area of cavitation. So if an object moves through an area of cavitation, the object actually can move a lot faster than it can through just pushing a wall of water ahead of it. So effectively what that patent is saying is that we're going to create this outer shell, and it's going to vibrate like crazy. We're going to put some electricity through it, some microwaves or whatever else through it, and it's going to allow the craft to move through the air as if it wasn't moving through the air at all. That solves two problems. One is it reduces the amount of friction across the craft, so the craft doesn't have to have all these super space shuttle tiles and all this other stuff to keep itself cool. So the object can now move freely through the air without heating up. The second advantage that it has is it's not going to create any sonic booms or any sound at all. So as this craft is moving through, you're not going to have like the donut trails like they had a while back when they were testing hypersonic objects moving through the atmosphere here, which actually was picked up by seismographs at universities. They were able to determine where the craft came from and how fast it was moving based on the seismic events that it was creating in the atmosphere. It was creating these multiple sonic booms and leaving a whole bunch of donut holes up in the sky. So this object can obviously move freely through air or water.
But how does it move?
That I don't know. All I know is I can tell you this: the act of angular motion being shifted to some form of linear form of movement is how it actually can turn. Now, what actually is pushing it? That I don't know. That I don't. I wish I did know that.
There's a lot of talk about superconductors and the ability of superconductors to operate in room temperature. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah. That's the holy grail of superconductive technology, is to reduce the temperature or to increase the temperature, actually, because superconductors work at ridiculously low temperatures, -272 or whatever that number is, and that's when they become the most efficient. So if you take a magnetic levitation train and put it on top of a superconducting magnetic rail that's been super cooled, then you could just move that train forever, and it's just going to have no friction, no whatever, and it's going to be incredibly efficient.
Let's talk superconductors just real quick. Bottom line, what are we trying to achieve with superconductors?
With superconductors, you're trying to get that holy grail of being able to operate it at a room temperature, because but
for what purpose? We're trying to do what with a superconductor?
So you can have a magnetically levitating train or anything operating at normal temperatures without having to supercool. Imagine how much nitrogen you would need to cool a track to allow a train to move across.
But it's basically a source of energy.
Well, it's not. Superconducting is not the source of energy. Superconducting is basically reducing the amount of energy necessary to make something move. So it's not the source necessarily of the energy. It's basically reducing how much energy is required to make an object move that's utilizing that technology.
Which is kind of what we're talking about with these objects.
Pretty much. Now,
because by the way, sorry, there's a number of related patents to this one, and one of them pertains to superconductors operating at room temperature.
Yep, and that's the holy grail. Now, whether or not they've achieved that or not, I don't have that answer.
But you're saying you don't know how these things move, so maybe that is how they move. Maybe they do have.
Well, I know how fast they move. I know, but the problem is I don't know what the theoretical limit of how fast they move. They've been tracked at over 24,000 miles. In fact, they've actually been tracked at over higher than that. They've been tracked underwater at over 500 miles an hour. That information I don't think has been released to the public yet. So imagine being in a submarine, and the fastest object you know of in the world is a Russian submarine, the Z-222, and that can move at, say, 51 or 50 miles an hour.
By the way, there was a submarine supposedly present during the USS Nimitz incident, but it said it detected nothing underwater.
Yeah, it detected nothing. And my understanding from that is that when these objects went underwater, that they weren't necessarily trying to engage the submarine. They were primarily trying to mess with the pilots.
So the 500 miles per hour underwater number, that comes from which incident then? Is that something on the East Coast?
That's something I don't know. If I let's just say I know that number, and I don't remember exactly where I got that information. We'll just say, you just have to trust me on that one.
But its speed underwater is slower than in the air, which
it makes sense. Water is 25 times more dense than air. Okay, so naturally, if you kind of calculate that out, it would make sense that it would be 25 times slower underwater. But water and air is not necessarily affected by it. It can move through it like a hot knife through butter. It doesn't seem to affect it at all. So theoretically, you would think that it should move as fast underwater as it does in air. But I think there's some other factor that weighs into that you can only move so much water out of the way with an object moving through it at speed to where it might cause some other problem, and I'm not sure what that would be.
Okay, here's something that doesn't make sense to me or to Michael, and that is this incident happened in 2004. We don't know when these things first began to fly, but let's just assume that's when they first began to fly. So they had this technology as early as 2004, which means they had been developing it for decades before that, built it somewhere. We're going to get to, you're going to tell us where these things were built and so forth. Why are we still using such conventional methods to go into space? Elon Musk, with his SpaceX and so on, is pursuing all these conventional methods to go to Mars.
He's changed his plan a little bit.
So, let's talk about Elon Musk. Elon Musk must know about this technology.
He does. Absolutely guaranteed.
So 100%. Why has he been pursuing antiquated technology to get to Mars?
Because if you're not ready to show this technology yet, and keep in mind too, when Tic Tac is moving, it doesn't have a door it can open up. So you can't open up a door and launch a satellite. You can't open up a door and drop a bomb. Okay, all you can do is observe and watch this cool little thing move around. Okay, other than
does it even have cameras on it? Do you know?
Do I know?
Yeah, do you know?
I would only assume that it does, and that assumption is probably based on information that I have that would say that it was going to be used more or less for a surveillance type aircraft, which was the first thing done.
Have these things actually been used for a purpose other than just testing them?
Yes.
And that's surveillance?
Surveillance and also to intimidate. And I can even give you the dates.
Okay.
November 20th, 2017. November 21st, 2017. They
were utilized to intimidate a foreign power? What can you tell us about that?
You'd have to look up Q4 of President Trump and what was going on around that time.
Okay, so you mentioned that. You told me to look up Q4 and look up a particular week. You said November 17th, and then the week would have been the week of November 20th. November 20th was actually Thanksgiving week. And so I was looking on Wikipedia and seeing what Trump did on each day that week. And then there's no entries for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as to what he did. But I was thinking, well, that's probably because it's Thanksgiving.
Right. But he did make an announcement on November 21st. I think that's when he announced that the Korea or North Korea was basically placed back on the terrorist list. Essentially, that was possibly if you're going to intimidate someone.
Oh, wait a minute. Remind me. Was this before or after he met with Kim?
This would have been after. I can't remember the dates he met with. He can't even say Kim Jong-un. He has to actually just call him Rocket Man. To watch him try to say that is just hilarious.
So, well, if they were off the watch list, I didn't even remember that they were taken off the terror watch list.
Yeah, they were.
Trump must have been the one who took them off because of his meeting with Kim, presumably.
Meeting, yeah.
So I had this great meeting with you. Okay, we're all cool. We fell in love. He takes them off the list, and then you're saying he put them back on the list that week.
Yeah, I believe. If I'm correct.
Okay, and what does that have to do with the Tic Tacs?
My understanding, without getting into graphic detail of how I know, is that if you're going to show proof of technology to a foreign entity, you basically put it at their back door and say, go outside and take a look. We were going to do the same thing with Japan when we were going to drop the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The original idea was to just tell everybody in Japan to take a look towards your coast. We're going to show you something that we can do, which would basically be a proof of our technology that we actually have. No one believed we actually had a nuclear bomb. Well, we only had 2, and those 2 were utilized, and so that was a different way of showing our technology. So the same thing happens again. We have air shows and we have different things around the world where we can do this, but a really cool thing is to send an object over to a certain location, put it right at their door at will, and have it sit right there, right in front of your face, and go, boom, there it is, boom, there it's gone. Now, we can do that. And that's the advantage of Tic Tac, because its ability to move erratically. It's autonomous.
And it could get to Korea in no time.
Very quickly. And it can leave there and go somewhere else. So the very next day, I think communications were made with Putin about Syria and things like that, where we were concerned about the gases being used or whatever's going on with Syria at the time. So if you look at around that time frame, you'll see that was an important time. The very next month is when the videos were released.
And what does putting them on the terror watch list or not on the terror watch list have to do with?
Essentially, it's whether it's his ability to maneuver around the United Nations and his ability to do certain things. If you're on a terror watch list, then you can't buy certain objects from certain companies around the world.
Right, but what does that have to do with the Tic Tac?
It doesn't have anything to do with the Tic Tac, because Trump has a very strange way of doing things. And he's Trump. I mean,
so I guess what you're saying is at that particular time, for whatever was going on, he wanted to demonstrate strength to North Korea.
Yeah.
So A, he shows them the Tic Tac, and B, he puts them back on the
Trump's got a new toy.
Terror watch list.
Yeah, he didn't know about the toy.
So you think that only the U.S. has this?
No, I think China has been working. China is way more advanced than Russia is right now in the same technology. But do they have it as advanced as ours? Absolutely not. Russia, I don't believe they actually have a flying craft. They may, but I know China either does or is very close to it.
That's what we were questioning again, this patent.
The patent doesn't go into detail about how this stuff was done. If you go through the history of the anti-gravity history, you're going to run across a few key certain problems that had to be resolved before they could get this type of a craft to fly. And a lot of those problems were resolved at the university level. And then at that point, it's one thing to take this object here and to make it weightless. And great, that's cool. That's really cool. That's a cool trick. We can probably sell that to Spencer's or something, or you'd be on the next, wish.com or something like that. That's great. But now get that object to start moving around at ridiculous speeds, and then other thoughts start coming into play. If we need to have eyes on target, we have the Kenan series of satellites, the KH. I'm good right now. We have the KH series of satellites. So these satellites are tasked to basically take pictures of different parts of the planet. They fly at a polar orbit, and they have to wait for the planet to move underneath them, because they're flying a fixed orbit. The planet actually turns underneath them, and you have to literally wait until you can take a picture. So what if you could take one of these objects and send it anywhere in the world in a matter of minutes and take pictures and get it back? Okay, that has a ridiculous amount of surveillance value.
So is it fair to say that these concepts and principles, et cetera, such that are in this patent, you believe are already known to other countries, and it's really a matter, though, of turning it into usable technology, and that's why the U.S. wouldn't be concerned about publicizing a patent like this?
Yeah, that's why I said that I said earlier, and I don't mean to take away from the fact that it's now a patent, but that patent is basically bogus, because when you look at it, it doesn't tell you exactly how this is done. It's just a patent, vaguely telling you how the technology is. Well, that patent could have been written 30, 40 years ago. It would have been the same patent. And it wouldn't have mattered who put the patent out. But the problem with the U.S. Navy putting out a patent with this technology on it is basically proof that either A, they have it, or B, they're going to have it. And obviously A is the answer.
So back to Musk for a second. If we're looking at simply exploring Mars, this thing would be great, right? You want to go there and snap some pictures.
I would assume that if this object can work as very well, the problem is the power source. I don't know the power source and the actual method of propulsion, because it has no heat signature. There's nothing on.
Well, and by the way, what we keep talking about is anti-gravity and defying gravity and creating this vacuum.
Well, let's think of it like a drone. Think of it like a drone. Okay, so we have a drone that we know can do some cool stuff. They're fun to play with. They're great toys or whatever. Now we have to make some sort of application for the drone to make it worthwhile. Let's put a camera on it. Okay, great. So we put a camera on it, and everybody's seeing camera footage with the drones. So that's a great thing. I love flying my drones. I do it all the time. But then you start to think more advanced. I want this drone to fly over to the Grand Canyon and get me some great footage and come back. But I live in Los Angeles. So I have to put a ridiculous amount of power supply on this thing to the point where obviously it wouldn't even be able to lift off the ground. So I have to overcome that. That's the problem with the Tic Tac, is how long can that craft stay airborne before it has to be refueled or whatever is done for the propulsion? That's the part I don't know. That's the part that patent doesn't answer.
Well, by the way, let me just say this real quick. One of the big things is gravity defying, but once you get out of the Earth's atmosphere, the effect of gravity becomes pretty nil anyway, right? So one of the big features of this, which is defeating gravity, works really well if you're talking about flying around the Earth and not having to deal with the gravitational pull of the Earth. But once you leave that gravitational force,
then at that point, all you have left is the propulsion.
Right. So now, and we still don't know what the propulsion is of this thing. What were you going to say, Michael?
Fravor and some of these people have said that these objects would just descend into an area and just hang out there for hours, if not days.
Yep.
So whatever their propulsion is,
well, that would make sense though, because
their energy rather.
Well, yeah. I mean, just to be gravity defying itself requires energy, you think, to create these vibrations or whatever it is that's creating this force that's creating the vacuum.
Let me reveal one more thing.
Okay.
All right, he's beating it out of me. Okay, inside either the Tic Tac or gimbal or whichever craft it is, you're going to have two counter-rotating objects. Okay, whatever they are, they're two counter-rotating objects that basically cancel each other out, much like a helicopter has to cancel out the rear rotor by having two rotors above each other so that it doesn't need the rear rotor anymore. So effectively what you have is you have these two objects that are rotating, counter-rotating against each other that balance each other out, but they also reduce the weight of the craft. Okay, whatever's causing those things to spin up, which is basically like having two gyroscopes spin up and have those gyroscopes change their angular motion into some form of linear motion, is where the trick is at. Now, how that's done is the big mystery. We could sit here probably all day long and not figure that out. Whether or not the propulsion is one thing, the power supply is another thing, and all of these are going to be the bigger questions answered. But the key part that I want to bring to the table is this. The objects exist. They're in the United States inventory. They're apparently now in the Navy inventory. So the Navy has them now. So the guys that actually witnessed the Nimitz situation that are having issues with what it was or whether it was extraterrestrial, are we just being screwed with? Well, the answer is, yeah, you're being screwed with. The Air Force basically tested their technology against the Navy. Now the Navy has tested its technology back against the Air Force. So the two competing military organizations both have this technology. Whether or not one's the gimbal, one's the Tic Tac or not, remains to be seen who has what. But obviously the Tic Tac was an Air Force thing. Tic Tac is about 46 feet long. It's about 9 or so feet wide or so. It's made so it can actually fit inside of a truck. So it can fit inside of a 53-foot truck, and it can be trucked anywhere it wants to go and then taken out. The other thing, too, about it is now the technology has gotten to the point where the camouflage ability of the craft means that craft could be sitting right outside your window right now, and if you looked outside, you wouldn't see it. Literally right outside the window. So that's the technology that they were pushing for. They didn't have it back in 2004, but now they have it.
Is there a belief that any of this technology is extraterrestrial?
I'm sure someone somewhere that's trying to get a bunch of hits on their website or on their YouTube channel or whatever it is they have is probably going to bring that into play. I saw no evidence, zero evidence to support that this technology was garnered from any other place other than terrestrial.
What do you know about this To the Stars Academy, how they claim to have metamaterials?
That I don't know about.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that subject.
And are you aware of this contract they've entered into with the Department of Defense? Is it actually with the Army? Actually with the Army. Mm-mm. So To the Stars Academy, which is a really interesting group and interesting name. Well, supposedly it started as a recording.
Luis Elizondo is on its board.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was started by the Blink-182 guy, and it started as a record label. and now has turned into what it is now, where they've hired a bunch of.
I think the Blink 182 guy, he has an affinity for extraterrestrial research.
Yeah,
that I understand.
Yeah,
he's going to be really saddened when he finds out where these come from, because they're literally come from about 40 miles away.
So, where are they built?
They're built 40 miles away from here.
That's Plant 42?
Plant 42, that's where they're made. Yeah, they're made up there. They're made in Palmdale. As far as I know, all three types of objects, there's three variations of this type craft. Tic Tac was first. There's another craft which has not, I don't think that one's been released yet, and then there's Gimbal.
And by the way, are these the official U.S. military names for them?
No. These are the names that we're giving.
Give us some official names.
No, I'm not giving you the X numbers. They do have X numbers, but the X number is so secretive that if you delve into that area, you're going to delve into who makes which X number. That's the problem. So all you have to do, what do you have to do when you want to find out if somebody's doing something wrong? What's the old saying? Follow the money. Follow the money. So that's essentially where it falls into this. You can look at the big contractors. You can look at Boeing. You can look at Raytheon. You can look at Lockheed Martin. You can look at Skunk Works. All of these different major players that are right up the hill here, because we're in a nice vicinity. Me and you could leave right now, and we'll go over there and drive and see the facility. Plant 42 is an Air Force installation. Plant 42 is a very secretive installation, yet it's just like Area 51. You can drive to it if you want to, but don't try to get on base. That area is where a lot of the defense contractors are actually there on site, rather than them have a facility in Seattle and another facility in Jacksonville, Florida, and another facility, wherever, and they try to piece this stuff together. Why not build them on site? Over to a place that they have full control over. Now, Palmdale is a hotbed of that type of technology when it comes to aircraft manufacturers that are delving into some of the black projects. So when you look at the key players and you look at who's there and who wakes up and goes to work every day and works there, you can figure out who's making Tic Tac, who's making some of the other X projects that are built there.
That's an Air Force base, though, right?
Yeah. But it's not called U.S. Air Force Plant 42. Its name is so secret that I can't even say what it is.
Do you believe that all three of these types of aircraft were built there?
Absolutely.
And who are the third-party contractors?
Not going to tell you.
But it's your Lockheed Martins, your Boeings,
those
type of companies are
it's going to be the key players that you already know about. There's going to be a couple of other players that we know the names, but we didn't realize that they have jumped into this arena yet. You mentioned one earlier. So SpaceX is going to be a part of probably this program down the road, because some of the technology that's being utilized. If you want to get an object into space fast and you want to get it into orbit fast and keep the price cheap, imagine these Tic Tacs who apparently can move at will and move from 28,000 feet to 0 feet in 0.78 seconds, which is 24,000 miles an hour. 24,000 miles an hour is plenty to get an object into space. Now, whether or not they can go in space, for some reason, I don't know that answer. I don't know the theoretical altitude limit of the objects. I know that they have been tracked at over 80,000 feet and have been tracked at speeds that are just unbelievable, which obviously 24,000 miles an hour.
So what would be the commercial utility for this? Could this be
Amazon.
the next airplanes?
Amazon.
Delivery?
Imagine Prime being on Prime and you can have you ordered it, it's already there. No, but no, that would be key. The problem is
second delivery.
Yeah, the problem is that maneuvering objects inside of this becomes an issue. If you put an object inside Tic Tac and move it around, that object is going to have an issue.
What's your understanding as to what is outside of it? If we picture Tic Tac as looking like a large Tic Tac, isn't there anything though also out on the outside of the Tic Tac?
There are 4 appendages outside of Tic Tac. They have multiple uses. One is when it lands, it effectively doesn't have to land. It actually without me revealing something, my understanding is that when it lands, it actually sits on some sort of platform. So it actually is attached to that platform, and that's whatever it does to power up or power down or to transfer data. But those 4 appendages that are outside are also antennas, either KA, KAB band antennas or whatever that they are, and they also could act as landing skids like you would have on a helicopter. The odd thing is that the appendages stay out while it's moving. In my mind would think that you would retract those and then there would be less friction, but since the craft creates its own bubble or whatever it flies in that is frictionless, then apparently it doesn't matter what shape it is. Also, it can maneuver itself while in flight to aim at different angles at will. It could be, you would think a Tic Tac would fly at the least amount of friction, but apparently it can fly at any angle it wants. Same thing with gimbal. Gimbal is the one that you see.
Grand total, how many of these things do you think have been produced?
Tic Tac is probably the most. I think that's the one that's going to be utilized the most. And what they were tracking down in San Diego was at least 20 of these objects. Apparently, the cost to manufacture them is not necessarily as much as what one would think. You would think that technology this advanced would cost more than, say, an aircraft carrier to make. Apparently not. The technology is apparently a little bit easier to attain than was formerly believed. And the cost, the technology to create the technology is what is the expense. Now, that sounds like some mumbo-jumbo. Mike threw some psychobabble words together. But effectively, we had to have the technology to create the technology that created Tic Tac. Mm-hmm. That occurred through a several-step process. One was through the university. One was through individuals, then to the university, then to DARPA, and then the money was fed into DARPA. DARPA turned it into an actual project to where, okay, well, let's research this, let's put some money into this, and actually get some craft built and test them. That's where Plant 42 came into play. Plant 42 made them. Then they literally just either trucked them over to Area 51 or they flew them over to Area 51 and they tested.
By the way, and I don't know if you know this, not being a physicist, but would these defy the laws of physics, or actually they're within the laws of physics?
They're within the laws of physics. They're working within the laws of physics. They're working within the laws of quantum physics at this point. You're bypassing the normal everyday rules that we all know and love, which is Newton's laws and things like that. But when it comes down to the actual mechanics of it, then you're looking at an object that is utilizing existing technology, obviously, and existing laws of physics to work within. So the idea of it is more or less bending the laws, much like warp technology would be considered. If you wanted to go super fast through space, you're going to warp. You're not going to go faster than the speed of light, because physically you can't go faster than the speed of light. But effectively, if you want to get from point A to point B, and that distance is further than a light year, and you were able to get there in minutes, then you actually went faster than the speed of light.
And what do you know about transporting a human being in or on one of these things?
That's where you have some issues. Now, if you do some calculations, if you speed up an aircraft at the ridiculous speeds that you see Tic Tac maneuvering, Tic Tac is all over the map, zigzagging back and forth, going from 28,000 to 0 feet or 50 feet in 0.78 seconds, which is effectively 24,000 miles an hour. If a person was inside that, they would be jellified. The person would just be a bag of bones and blood at that point.
Yeah. But unless it was in some type of vacuum where you're not getting the impact of those.
No, you would
feel the speed.
Yeah, you would still feel the speed. So what you would do is you would take that craft and you would speed it up slowly. If you do 1G acceleration, it doesn't at 32 feet per second. As you accelerate an object at 1G, you're going to be going ridiculous speeds very fast. If you want, actually pull up a calculator and just figure out how fast you would be going at 15 minutes at 1G acceleration. So
it's like being on a plane and just keep going faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, but there's also the turnaround time. You also have to spin around and slow down at a certain point to decelerate. So your acceleration point is going to have a deceleration point at midpoint, wherever that's going to be, depending on where you're going.
Right.
But the problem is what if that changes? So if your aircraft is flying at, say, 17,000 miles an hour in the atmosphere, and you have a person on board and you need to maneuver that aircraft, that's different. When you put an object in space, in orbit around the Earth, that object is following around the Earth. So it's in a continual, perpetual free fall around the Earth, and then that's where you get the weightless properties or whatever. But you're not continuously maneuvering that object to get from point A to point B. So if I wanted to get from here to New York, And then on the way, someone said, "Oh, we need you to stop over here in Dallas for something." That one maneuver would kill somebody.
But we don't need to take a detour in Dallas. I want to go from L.A. to New York. Instead of it taking 5.5 hours, I want it to take 30 minutes. It seems like this thing
that's very doable.
You could probably do it in 30 minutes
or an hour and 24 minutes.
How'd you come up with an hour and 24?
We'll have to do the one video. You have to do the facial reaction video. I'll show you something.
Oh, okay. When are we doing the facial reaction? Is there time for that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so let's talk about this before we do it. So what are we going to see what you have as well? No.
Only you'll see it, but he'll see it, and I'll let you do it.
Just keep the cameras rolling. It's okay.
Yeah, just keep it going. This is
okay.
Come together.
I'll watch it after the
Okay. Just make sure I'm in the shoot here. Okay. And are we gonna look at this together?
Yeah, we're gonna look at this together. Okay. So we're gonna go to.
You gotta stay where you're at.
Okay.
Okay. So go to my maps. And,
I'm already reacting. Okay. I'm just looking at
click maps.
Maps.
I'm on the M. I'm on M. I can't see it.
No, I'm on ends.
Ends. Okay, go to M.
Go to M. Okay. Okay, and I'm gonna go to map.
Shit, I hit the wrong one.
Can our
That's
audience
okay.
know what he's supposed
This
to
is
be
all.
looking
This
at?
is all build up. Don't worry. I'm looking at Google Maps, and I'm looking at our address here in Encino.
Oh, yeah. So
Okay.
this is real maps.
Okay.
So back out of that, and then go to my timeline.
Hit done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then go to the top left hand there and go to the timeline.
Okay, your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm on Google Maps.
Yeah,
your
and then
timeline.
just go back, like you can see how I got here today. How
Okay,
long did it
you
take
went 65 miles in an hour and 25 minutes.
Are you serious?
Huh?
Okay, that's great. So we'll be 1 minute off. 65 miles an hour and 25
Because you had said an hour and 24 minutes, right?
Yeah, so I was moving pretty quick. So now what we're going to do is hit today, and we're going to go back in time, and then scroll back. You're going to just slide the calendars back.
You mean back to a prior month?
Yeah, going to go back to November. No,
Oops.
hit that again. No, go back to timeline.
Timeline.
Okay, hit today.
Hit today.
That's now the calendar. Just scroll the whole
Whole
calendar.
thing
Yeah,
this
there you
way,
go.
which
And
is
keep
going to take me
going.
to September.
Yep. Now keep
Okay,
going
what
until
month?
you get to November of 2017.
Okay. November of 17, which was a big month for UFO people.
Yep.
Okay.
Hit the 17th. Do not actually verbally state what you're about to see.
Okay.
But we're just going to see your reaction. Okay, so this is just me that day. I'm traveling around. I was told I was, to go get some things and whatever. So I traveled. You can see the places I went.
Okay.
Now,
I'm seeing where Mike was on November 17th, 2017 on this map. Okay.
Now go forward one day.
By the way, that's kind of cool. I was asking somebody recently if you can do this. So Google Maps will track where you went that day?
Yep.
Is that you just got to have that turned on at all
just
times?
Yep, just have that on.
So, because I was in Venice, Italy, sort of for my honeymoon for 4 days, and Venice is a small town, and we'd walked a lot of it, and I was thinking, it'd be cool if something tracked everywhere that I've been so far, so I can make sure on our last day we walk to places in Venice that I haven't been so far. You're saying that's what Google Maps does?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So now you go forward one day. So hit that down arrow key again, and then you go to the 18th.
Okay, you flew across the country.
Now scroll down, and you can see where I went that day. Kind of
Looks like you flew from L.A. to New York is what it looks like to me. But you're home in Chino. Can I say this?
Yep.
And then you went to Ontario, probably the Ontario airport.
Yep. Just don't mention where I ended up.
Okay.
But you can mention how fast got there.
Okay. So you started home in Chino. Then you go to Ontario. And then you're at the 99-cent store, you cheap bastard. It's at the 99-cent store.
I was told to get some
It's my dad's favorite store. Don't worry.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, then back to Chino, and then you went to a smoke shop.
Yep. I had to get some stuff for my vape.
Is that weed or is that
no? Don't do weed. Don't do drugs.
Okay. Then we go to home something.
And then you can see
And then
how far I went and then how long it took. That's why.
now, can I say this or not?
You can say the distance and the time, but not the location.
So it says that you were driving, not flying,
Right.
2,200 miles in an hour and 24 minutes. That's the hour and 24 minutes.
That's the hour and 24 minutes. Yeah, and you can go to the top and go to the actual.
And the top shows a grand total of 2,300 miles.
So keep zooming in until you see where I ended up.
Well, I already saw.
Yeah, you saw that one.
I saw that. Yeah.
But
can we say it's on the East Coast?
Yeah.
That's all we can say?
For now.
Okay. So you went to the East Coast on November 18th.
My birthday.
According to Google Maps. Oh, is your birthday?
Mm-hmm. November 18th is my birthday.
Happy birthday coming up. Wow, you went to the East Coast on your birthday.
Or
driving.
Least, or we'll say my phone did. whether or not I want to admit.
By the way, is driving correct?
Driving would not
be correct,
but I think that there's a certain speed parameter that once you go over it, because you can go to, like, when I went to Florida and it shows a little airplane icon, but for some reason it won't show it there for that.
And by the way, this thing understands time zones, right? So, I mean, actually, you lose 3 hours when you fly.
Well, yeah, because it shows the travel time. Just like when you saw when I drove here, it was an hour and 25 minutes. So that's the travel time. But it doesn't. It's not going to, like, be 4 hours and then calculate off the 3 hours and just throw it out the window. That's the actual travel time. You can bounce around anywhere you want and go to any date. If you want to go to, a date that I flew is last month. You know. So let's go to September.
Okay.
And my mother passed away on the 14th. I flew out on the 18th.
Okay.
And you can see how it says it there.
That was flying.
Right. And
4 hours and 21 minutes.
Correct.
Which makes sense. Okay, so the question that we all want to have answered is, how did you get from Ontario, California, to the East Coast of the United States in an hour in 24 minutes?
Well, that's going to be the big mystery. That's going to be the biggest cause of issue for people watching this. They're going to say that I manipulated that, I somehow faked it, or I don't know how you could do that, but I'm sure people know.
I'm sure you could figure it out.
I could probably figure it out and probably do it, but that's kind of a hard one to do. And you can actually, if you backtracked, you would actually see where I left from in Ontario. But we don't want to show that to the camera.
Okay. I want to look at it just one more time.
Yeah, you can look. You go through whatever you want.
It's like a David Blaine magic trick. And it's like I want to replay the magic trick and see it in slow motion. So
or see if it changes in between.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to November 17th. No, the 18th, right?
Hit the down arrow key again. You go to the date and hit down, and the calendar comes up.
18th. And grand total at the top, it shows you going 2,300 miles in 2 hours and 37 minutes. That's the grand total. It starts with you at home and then taking 17 minutes to get to the first place. Then you walked for a few minutes, and then you drove for 17 minutes, and then you drove for 34 minutes. You drove for another 7 minutes. And then you go. You're saying I can't say where you left from?
No, that'd be like revealing my home address.
Can I reveal the city?
You can reveal the city, yeah.
So Rancho Cucamonga, I assume that is.
Right?
That
was Chino.
Why does it say no? It says Rancho.
Oh, that was Rancho Cucamonga. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
So Rancho Cucamonga, and the next destination is the East Coast. Now, but here's one thing that's odd. It says 6:48 being in Rancho Cucamonga, and then it shows you on the East Coast at 11:42.
Yeah, because
that's a 3 hour time difference.
Yeah, that's basically I stayed in that same location for a while too.
Well, but I think that's the 3 hour time difference.
Yeah, but it won't
because if you'd been there at 8:12,
right,
that would have been an hour and 24 minutes.
Right. So it shows the correct time that I actually ended up.
So bottom line, according to Google Maps, Mike Turber, or at least Mike Turber's phone, went from Rancho Cucamonga at 6:48 p.m. on November 18th and wound up an hour and 24 minutes later on the East Coast of the United States. And this thing, I assume I can't say this. What this thing is.
I would not say that. Okay. No.
Now that's a magic trick.
Yeah, and you can see where I was the next day and the next day.
I believe you.
So you know where I was.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so what do you want to share with us about what I just saw?
Nothing. You didn't see it. It was all a fig Newton of your imagination. Look right here.
I mean, did you fly on a Tic Tac to the East Coast?
We'll just say that at that time, somehow, this phone was able to get from the West Coast to the East Coast in that amount of time. Whether or not I was with the phone remains to be seen.
Okay, well, I don't think you were with the phone because, as you talked about before, there are issues with transporting a human.
Yeah. You want to see my feet?
Your feet?
There's some issues with moving at high speed. But the other thing is that if you actually open up a 1G calculator or acceleration calculator, you can actually determine that you would, if you left here at 1G acceleration, you would achieve a very high rate of speed, but your average speed would be, say, 4,000, maybe 5,000 miles an hour, which is not that fast, which is fast, but not that fast compared to Tic Tac, what it could do. But getting to that speed doesn't take as long as you think. But your slowdown would start over midpoint in Kansas, and that's where you would get up to that speed, and then the craft would start slowing down at that point. So, and do it all without being on any radar.
And that, you're saying, a human
could handle.
Could handle.
1G acceleration is super simple. Now imagine if you're on a shuttle, you're achieving 3 or more G's acceleration. If you're on a F-18 or F-16 or F-15, you're actually hitting upwards of 6 to 9 G's. So
how was the food on the flight? What were you served?
Not going there.
Were you able to use was there a bathroom on board? Did you hold it the whole time?
Let's say theoretically, if I was on board the craft, theoretically there would be color-coded things on the floor that would tell you where you could go, where you couldn't go, and if you went into a certain area, you would be dead. So it actually shows there's a green track, there's a yellow track, and a red track, and a black track. So from anywhere in the green area you can go to, anywhere in the yellow area is a caution, meaning don't bend over or don't pick up.
What about even sticking your finger into that area?
You'd have a problem.
You might lose your finger.
I don't know. I would not try to figure that out. Yeah.
Now, how would you get back home from the East Coast?
Same way.
Same way. Can we see that?
Sure. Here, let me get
bring it up for me. How many days did you spend on the East Coast?
Left on the Monday. I think Monday was the 20th.
So you went there on the 18th, Saturday.
Right.
And you took in a Redskins football game, right?
No, didn't play any games. Didn't go see any games. Pretty much it was all work. Let me try this thing again. Timeline.
I would have thought you had to fly back commercial.
Yeah,
Coach.
That's what I would have thought too. In fact, that was up in the air. But here, I'll show you. So we got the 19. Pretty much stayed right there.
Okay.
Then we go to the 20th.
20th. Okay, flying home. Where does it tell me the time it took?
Unless the phone was at this point, see how the color is gray? That means the phone was probably off at that point. But you can see
1.5 miles. Now you're back in Corona. Somehow it didn't catch it. It looks like, right?
Yeah, I believe the phone was off on the trip back.
Okay, but bottom line, you came back. You came back the same way.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. How has all this developed without it being publicly disclosed? I mean, I just don't believe in people's ability. There's so many leakers.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, how is it possible that we've gotten this technology, we've built it, we've flown it without people knowing about it?
Well, the weird thing is that they've done something. Keep in mind, this object is able to move. Literally, we could have it outside the window. In fact, are you ready? I got him. You see his face.
Get my that's the reaction you wanted to see.
Was the one I was gonna do. Oh, and I've never seen you do that before. I got you. I got him.
You'll see that on replay. That I think my eyes widened a bit.
Yeah, it did. I was privy to that. I wish I had my camera over here going. That was a good one.
Well, after the cell phone trick, I'm willing to believe any trick at this point. So I absolutely believed I was about to see a craft hovering out there.
That's the point. That's the point I just tried to make to you. It was now, at this point, it's no longer a far-fetched idea for me to pull this back and show it to you. Okay? You would actually go, I'm okay with this. That's why they're doing it this way.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, you want to...
Yeah.
Well, sorry.
Yeah,
my original point, though, was not why are they leaking the information out, is the fact that how the hell did we keep this secret?
Yeah,
all this time?
I
That
get
means
it.
a lot of people had to have known about this. A lot
of people do know about it. And the thing about it is that now you have all of these sailors and Air Force personnel. Now, keep in mind, the Air Force didn't just, go down and play with the Navy for a couple of days, and that was it. Okay, this actually transcends into people on submarines, people on various aircraft, people in different agencies witnessing these things, and us trying to see how people will respond to them, even air traffic control. The thing about air traffic control is these objects cannot be tracked by certain radar, but as our radar systems are upgraded, okay, so there's a key point here. We're going to bring a lot of information into this. It's going to make a lot of sense. Our whole country is going to actually upgrade its complete radar system. When it does, and other countries have already done so, then these objects will be tracked again. Keep in mind the type of radar that's used on the Aegis cruiser is a phased array radar. All you have to do is set up a phased array radar system across the country, and guess what? These objects are going to be tracked again.
Okay, what is the technology that permits it to be effectively invisible? You said if it was sitting across the street right now,
you wouldn't be able to see it. Yeah, the technology available there is technology that's now coming to light that a lot of people are seeing, which is effectively you have cameras on one side of the craft, and then that whatever it sees over there is being rebroadcast over here, whether on some sort of OLED screen or whatever you want to call it, or whether it's just through some sort of warping of like a Fresnel lens, which is what you have on a big screen television when you look at it. And if you stood in front of, everybody's watched someone in a shower, right? And you don't see the person, but you see this shadowy figure moving in the shower because the light rays coming through there have been bent and distorted to the point where you're not even really sure it's a person anymore. But at some point, those light rays are bent so much that you can't tell anyone's in there. Okay, but obviously something's moving in there. So fast forward that technology from the 30s, 40s, and 50s to today, and now you have devices where people can put on a jacket and effectively you can see right through them. So
are you actually seeing through them?
No, you're not seeing through them. What you're doing is whatever's happening behind
Yes.
is essentially being rebroadcast, so to
Okay.
speak, up front. So no matter what
gotcha.
angle, but it's either active or passive technology.
Backward facing cameras are being put onto the front.
Effectively, now that technology gets into several different areas. That's where you have new competing technology. You've got even foreign countries that are competing for that technology, such as Samsung and some other LED or different types of OLED companies that are manufacturing types of displays that are bendable. But then you also have the other factor where it's just like a Fresnel lens. You can just there's one guy, I think there's a video out there, whether or not this is real or not, it seems more fake, where he just takes a piece of fabric or what looks like a piece of fabric, puts it in front of him, and it looks like something out of the Predator, where you just don't see it. I can say this craft here, if you were looking at it, would very much have that Predator type look, meaning you would see some sort of anomaly that's happening visually, but you're not going to actually see the craft. And that's the key point.
But that technology is not the reason that radar doesn't pick it up.
No. The
radar doesn't pick it up because why?
Radar doesn't pick it up because of advanced materials that are the composite materials that it's made out of. We have advanced stealth technology to the point where a B-2 bomber comes across on a radar screen the size of a hummingbird. So you can imagine taking an aircraft that's 46 feet long, which is the same size of a Super Hornet, and getting its signature down to where it's maybe the size of a fly. And keep in mind too, when these guys were tracking these objects off the coast of San Diego, they would pop, these aircraft would pop in. They were wondering, was this a flight formation for a bunch of helicopters or what's going on, because the speeds weren't that great. But then once the maneuvering started happening, then they knew they had something different that they were dealing with. That's when they decided to retask these 2 aircraft to go take a visual look at.
So how many people flew in this thing with you?
I have no idea. I don't remember flying in this aircraft myself. I said my phone may have taken that trip, but I don't recall myself.
You have no recollection. Not even a dream. You don't remember in a dream.
I can neither confirm nor deny. But let's just say this. The problem with me stating if I've actually flew on this craft or not is going to create more problems than it's going to solve. In other words, people are going to get distracted from the technology that we're trying to present here, and they're going to fixate on whether or not I'm telling the truth or not as to whether or not I was on this craft. I don't really care if anyone believes I was on the craft or not. I'm not here to push that. I'm not here to even state that. But the key point is that craft was able to maneuver from one location to another location without being seen at all from a warehouse in Ontario or Rancho Cucamonga to a certain building on the East Coast that you saw the building where it went to without anyone noticing it at all. That's key.
And that's why these things have been taking off and landing in Palmdale for a long time.
Yep.
Because you can't see them.
Right. And the other factor there, back in the 2004 incident, keep in mind that some of the sailors went on deck, and they looked through these huge binoculars that they have on deck, and they were able to see it with their own eyes, even late in the evening, or I guess it was even at night. And they said it looked like a light on the horizon. Well, I don't recall whatever technology is necessary to have them create light, because they don't have lights on them, from my understanding. But apparently, these guys could see them clear as day. They saw them on radar. They saw them with their eyes. They saw them through binoculars. These guys witnessed these things 3 and 4 different ways, whether it was through electromagnetic spectra, where they were actually to see them on FLIR, and they were able to see them on visual. They saw them with their eyes. They saw them through binoculars. They saw them every which way but through to Sunday, which actually it was a Sunday, as a matter of fact. So, yeah.
But again, going back to the secret part of this, like even the pilot who saw these things in 2004, it was just on Rogan's show a month ago, still doesn't know. How could it be that the pilot, one of the pilots who saw it still doesn't know what this is?
Let's delve down into a little bit more of the meat of the matter here. Okay, we've bounced around a little bit, and I've danced a little bit, I'll admit it. But here's the situation. When that event occurred off San Diego, an unprecedented thing happened. The Princeton was actually taken out of the carrier group and actually went into port in San Diego. Okay, on board the Princeton was Air Force personnel. This is your Air Force connection here. This is your proof that the Air Force did it. There has to be some witness somewhere that saw these personnel there. Okay, so that aircraft, whenever it was seen, the military sent a liaison group to go pick up all of the data, all of the bricks, which is what they call all the devices. They call them bricks. So they pulled all the bricks out of the aircraft, and they even took the physical, actual equipment that recorded the data off of these aircraft, making those aircraft unflyable. This has to be out there. This information someone somewhere has to come up and go, okay, this happened, this event occurred, and yes, what Mike's saying is true. And there's Air Force personnel were there because they had to be. The liaison group that was there, the Princeton came into port in San Diego but never docked. Didn't have to dock. So they took that equipment that they took off of there, because Princeton has helicopters on board it too. It's got its own bay for helicopters.
So part of your point is this was all premeditated, pre-planned.
Absolutely.
Air Force personnel are already on the Navy ship, ready to take back. But we wanted to see how our own military responded to this.
Absolutely.
And then what about the incident on the East Coast? Was that another situation?
A whole other situation utilizing a competing technology or a competing company, we'll just say. Anytime the military puts out these contracts, naturally they're going to put them out to several companies to build these things, and just whoever comes in cheaper, better, faster, stronger, whatever you want to call it.
And what budget is this? What budget is this coming out of?
There's one hell of a black budget that goes through there. The Senate Appropriations Committee actually keys up all of these different projects, and you basically go in and they'll take $100 billion or whatever they want to do and put it towards black projects that only certain key members of Congress would know.
So that's what I was going to ask. So how many members of Congress would have known about the commencement of the project?
That number I wouldn't know. That's not my specialty, but there would be a number that would. They may not know that this particular project, they'll know about the technology. They'll say, okay, DARPA's obviously researching this type of technology. This is how much money we're willing to put into it. And at a certain point, if you don't have proof of technology, then we're going to pull the money from you. And that's happened quite a bit. A lot of the X projects that happen, a lot of those X planes have been pulled because they were not able to achieve.
When would Trump have learned about this?
Yeah.
Can't go there.
Yeah, no.
Why? But
good try though.
Well, let me ask it a different way. Why wouldn't this be something that a new president would be briefed on?
They don't do that
very soon after taking office.
It's a need-to-know basis. Basically, the president, when a new president comes into play, there's presidents that have come and gone that a lot of technology was never revealed to them. It's because they don't need to know it. A lot of the technology, a lot of the times that security clearances or whatever, people are compartmentalized so that this compartment over here doesn't know what this compartment over here knows or what's going on.
Okay, but hold on a second. Need to know. Come on. This qualifies, in my opinion, as need to know. I don't know that I need to know it until I know it, but
yeah.
I'm telling you, a president should have...
You sound like Clinton when he said, what do we not know and when will we know it?
A president should have this information because he may decide, I want to really accelerate this technology. Mm-hmm. I may want to slow it down. I may want to do this or that with it. But come on, I want to put my 2 cents in. I'm commander-in-chief.
Yeah, but you keep in mind the commander-in-chief is only going to be here for 4 years.
Yeah.
And since he's only going to be here for 4 years, would you really want to entrust this brand new technology to someone that really just came out of the woodwork, who before was in the civilian private sector, is commander-in-chief of the military? Do you think anyone at the Joint Chiefs of Staff would go, it's probably a good idea to show Trump this, and then see what he does? And we basically saw what he did.
Were you talking about the interview?
On November 21st and 22nd, you saw what happened there. There was a bunch of people that got together apparently in that same facility and discussed options of what this technology can be utilized for. So the technology was basically batted around between various groups, and of course the president is naturally going to say, wow, I'd like to send this over to Kim Jong-un's house and tell him to go outside and take a look and, no, don't mess with us anymore. Click, 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 boom, and it's there. Hey, because he's got the red phone now. Remember, he's got the phone line straight to...
So Trump essentially deployed this.
I can neither confirm nor deny that, but I would say that it would be a wise guess that the timing of what was going on there...
He does strike me as someone who would have a real tough time not choosing to deploy in some way.
I think if you give him a toy and tell him not to use it, it's probably going to be a problem.
At least he didn't tweet about it.
Yeah, unless he was able to find a faster way to move Rosie O'Donnell around, maybe.
So, no, the only thing he said on record, I think, was a George Stephanopoulos interview, where he just said, hey, what do you know about this, and so on. And he said, oh, I don't know anything about it, but I don't think that it's extraterrestrial.
And that would be correct. He didn't lie. It's not extraterrestrial.
So you said that you believe that Musk is going to be able to take advantage of this.
I think what's going to happen is, based on previous technologies, nothing of this magnitude, however, because think of the implications of what you have now. If you can take objects and effectively make them weightless or very close to it, or even just reduce the factor of weight by a factor of 50, fossil fuels would be greatly affected. Any object that requires movement would be affected. Basically, every industry.
As long as the amount of energy needed to make it weightless doesn't exceed the amount of energy necessary to propel it now.
And that apparently is
the case.
That apparently is the case. Yeah.
Right. Then it comes down to cost. But this is something I've said before about climate change and so on, and everybody wanting to spend billions and trillions of dollars to try to affect the climate, which is a dubious goal to begin with, but that some technology is going to come around that is going to make fossil fuels irrelevant, and this is it. So we're going to solve to the extent fossil fuels are causing global warming, climate change, and so on. It's always been my view that technology is going to end up taking care of it. There's going to be some new technology that makes fossil fuels totally antiquated,
right.
And this could be it.
This could be it. And I'm sure after this broadcast, I'm either going to be labeled a whistleblower or I'm going to be labeled a quack.
Well, but I thought you're saying that you believe Department of Defense wants this information to slowly leak out.
Absolutely, as evidenced by them assisting that information by in December of 2017, a month after what you just saw, that information was released. At that time, I was in the middle of the investigation with the Las Vegas event, and it was distracting, but I was very concerned that the MSM did not pick up on. It didn't get any traction. It's like, hey, we just saw a bunch of aliens landed in the middle of Central Park, and we have it on video, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's nice." That to me is the level of no one cared. No one gave a shit.
No, all we care about is what Trump tweets about.
Yeah, no doubt.
So wait a minute. So you were surprised that there wasn't more of a public reaction
Absolutely.
to the videos.
Yep.
And you were expecting what reaction?
Something. I'm like, I remember.
You thought it would be bigger news.
I thought it'd be a lot bigger news.
Well, part of the reason, though, I think, is the damn grainy videos, because it looks like, the same grainy UFO videos we've been seeing for years.
Yeah, but keep in mind, the trip out to the East Coast predates the December release of the videos, so I obviously was privy to some of the information beforehand. Okay, so me saying that I had to wait to see the videos before anything actually was maneuvered on my part for me to study it. I had been studying it for a long time. Okay, so the issue that I had at the time was my buildup was over a long period of time, and I was ridiculously excited about it. Okay, about finally this is going to come out. They're actually, I get a call. Okay, when are they going to do it? They're going to do it on Fox. They're going to do it on CNN, or what? They're going to do it on all of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So the Department of Defense is just going to release it, and we'll be good to go. And they kicked Lewis to the side, and that to me was a problem, because this guy comes in, he's hired to go in to actually investigate this phenomena and determine what it is, and he goes in and does what he's paid to do, and then after a certain period of time, his contract is nixed and kicked to the side. They release this information, and then next thing you know, all they do is they make it into a Harry Reid / Bigelow event, and
do you believe that Luis Elizondo knows what this is?
No.
So the guy who's running the $28 million department
it's hard
to figure out what this is, investigating ultimately ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think he honestly went in with the idea of determining what these things were, but I think there's some sort of predominant thought process he was going through that made him believe that maybe they were extraterrestrial or something not of this world, or whatever it is he was thinking. And I think that's the direction he went with it. Why, I don't know, because my first thought would be, okay, let's be serious here. Let's try to see if there's any technology that exists that could do this, and let's see if the military advanced it. The military advanced it, ridiculously. When you look at, I think it's Moore's law, where every 18 months computers double in speed and all this other stuff. You don't have that with this.
Wouldn't the U.S. want to keep this secret for as long as possible?
They did.
They have so far, and done an amazing job to the
and they even showed it to us.
For me to believe.
Yeah, and they even showed it to us, and we still don't believe it. It's like, here it is. Okay, well, guess what, Jim? Yeah. They did exactly what you said. They didn't believe it.
But I thought you were saying that you think now they want it to slowly leak out.
Well, because like I alluded to earlier, a lot of the radar systems around the world are going to change over to phased array radar systems and stuff like this, and there's going to be a lot more people seeing these things. So do you want a whole bunch of crazed people, calling in to their local police agencies or the airports and saying, "Hey, I just saw a UFO"?
But at some point, there's going to have to be some more official announcement about it, probably, right?
Well, that's why they're testing the waters. I'm not sitting here. I'm not on CNN. Back in the day, back in December 2017, they said that they are going to release it. Okay, well, there's a lot of people that knew about the information to some degree, myself obviously being one of them. And then you start looking at it, okay, let's look at the pool of people that we have to push this information out to the public, and let's see exactly which ones are going to carry weight. Well, I only know about part of it. I don't know what the propulsion unit is. I don't know what the power supply is. I don't know if it recharges or any of that stuff. But all I know is what it was capable of doing. I know who made it. I know who makes Tic Tac. I know who makes gimbal. And those two objects are made 40 miles away from here. So I can tell you where they're made. I just won't tell you which manufacturers made them. But we've already mentioned manufacturers earlier that have something to do with the development of these aircraft. So there's a lot of money to be made here, but there's also a lot of money to be lost. Keep in mind the industries that are in business right now because things weigh. Now, imagine what would happen if that's taken away. But the other,
do you have any concept of the cost to make one of these things?
I don't.
But it's got to be within a certain budget. How much? I was debating this with somebody recently. Like an F-18, what does it cost to build an F-18?
I think F-18 would probably be in the neighborhood of 30, maybe 50 million in that range.
A lot more than that.
No.
What's the most expensive aircraft?
Any of the B-2s, like the B-2 bomber would be like a billion.
A billion. I knew there was something that was a billion.
You keep in mind that one plane costs about as much as what aircraft carriers used to cost.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, these are huge military budgets. We, by the way, have had our military budget shrunk for a long period of time under the Obama administration. Yeah. It was significantly shrunk. But these would have been developed. Going back to which administration do you think would have been the one that this was really launched under?
Reagan.
So this goes back to the 80s.
Yeah, this goes back to the original Star Wars program. One of the thoughts that was
came out of Star Wars, you believe?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the initial seed money for it came out of that, yeah.
Which is really amazing, though.
I hope I'm alive tomorrow.
Well, it's just people thought that Reagan was Looney Tunes when he talked about Star Wars.
Here's where I actually play back into this whole factor again. Star Wars back in the day, they had this whole program figured out that they were going to put these ridiculous systems in space, which was going to be very cost prohibitive. They're going to put lasers in space. It would shoot down anything that come up. How in the world are you going to put a huge chemical laser system in space and keep powering it and keep maintaining it and stuff like this? We have a hard time maintaining the space station. Imagine how much it would take to keep these lasers and all these other different weapons done. So why not? Back in the day, we had the big think tank, and me and another guy came up with an idea. Why don't we just build the laser on the ground and put mirrors in space, and then let the mirrors just maneuver those around and let them aim at whatever object you're trying to hit. Then you don't have nearly as much. Of course, you have the atmosphere you're going through, which the laser is going to lose some of its ability to focus. But
did we even have lasers capable of shooting things down at that point?
Yes,
we did. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. There's a heavily outfitted KC-135 that carried a chemical laser system on board, and it was actually in operation in the mid '80s to early '90s, I believe.
Has our military ever used a laser to shoot something down?
Absolutely. Yep.
Like where?
Mainly, there's several ships that actually have onboard laser systems that have been utilized to shoot down drones and various other things. So yeah, lasers have been used to shoot down things.
So anyway, we're talking about this coming from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Coming from that time era. Keep in mind the technology that was back then was obviously nowhere near what it is now. So they had a lot of key obstacles to overcome. But that's where the money started. That's where everyone said, okay, this is acceptable, and this is where the Senate Appropriations Committee or whoever funnels the money around to the black budget projects goes, you know what, this might have some potential. If you can prove to me, that's where the proof of the pudding came in. If you can prove to me that this technology is viable and will actually be for the common good of the United States and will be for national security. And if you tell me, hint, hint, if you tell me that the Chinese and the Russians are trying to do this, then yeah, that'll spool it up a little faster.
What do you know about Space Force?
Not much. It's
does what's going to be the new Space Force that Trump announced relate in any way to Tic Tac?
It's obviously going to utilize some of the same technologies. Keep in mind, there's been a space command in the Air Force for many years. You have NORAD, you have all these different things that track all the objects in space. You've got Vandenberg Air Force Base right up the road, which does all the NRO launches, the National Reconnaissance Office. Those launches are done here. And then you have various other projects that are being farmed out to the civilian world. You've got Falcon 9s that are launching defense satellites. So obviously there's some sharing of technology and communications, because you can't just the National Reconnaissance Office is not going to deliver you a satellite that's built by, say, Raytheon and say, okay, here, let's put it on your Falcon 9. And by the way, we're not going to tell you what it is. We just want to buy space. No, they need to know what it is, how it operates, and all these different things. So all of this technology is already shared with a lot of civilian companies. Now, how are they going to do it with this? Are they going to keep this technology at such a high level that only certain application fields will utilize it? Because if you take everything and obviously you make trucks that travel across the country that weigh 60,000 pounds and you make them weigh a few hundred pounds and they only need a gallon of gas to go 300 miles, then you've destroyed a complete industry. So you suppress that technology for that purpose. What you do is you utilize the technology in areas that only are going to experience the greatest benefit from it, i.e. surveillance and things that cost a ridiculous amount of money. And then you utilize it for that, but you don't do it for the others.
If I'm a stock investor, what stock should I buy to try to take advantage of
cannabis? I guess we're going to edit that part out. Apparently, cannabis is the number one thing
because
right now.
People are going to start smoking a lot of weed when they learn.
When they start seeing these things fly around, trust me, they're probably going to, honey, bring me the bomb. But the areas that are probably going to benefit mostly are obviously the ones that benefit now. Any of the advanced research project companies that are already on contract with the military and the government to build these types of objects will. Now, when it converts over to the civilian industries, the first industry I think that would benefit from it would be any aircraft manufacturer that would be able to utilize this technology, basically getting away from some of mainly if you're reducing the weight of an object as it moves through air, then I think the civilian aircraft.
Well, my question sort of goes back to the patent question, though. It's like, who's got the rights to this thing or the unique knowledge on it that's going to really capitalize on it? Is it one of the big defense contractors?
Well, think about this. Why did the Navy file a patent? I mean, why is it the Navy that filed the patent, not the college or the university or not the company that develops it or whatever? This is a combination of several technologies put into one. Yeah. So I would say that patent is probably not worth the paper that's written on.
It may not be. A lot of patents are pretty much unenforceable. But as far as why they did it, I mean, it would be a way of controlling what private companies can do. If you want to limit private companies say, hey, we got a patent on this, you can't do this.
Isn't there a rule that the government is not allowed to compete with the private sector?
Not necessarily. I mean, it competes. The post office competes with UPS.
That was one of the first. That's one of the first ones, and that's one of the first ones that everybody went to battle with. It's like, wait, the post office is not a part of the government, just like the IRS is not a part of the government, but it really is because it receives all the benefits of being a part of the government.
Well, are you familiar with our military filing for patents? I wasn't even familiar with this concept. It's the first time I've heard of.
Well,
I assume it's not a new thing, but I wasn't familiar.
I think normally what you see is not necessarily the military filing the patents. You see the company that has developed the technology that wants to get that money back. They file the patent, and then they say, okay, I'll sell you exclusively to the military or to whoever.
I mean, isn't it interesting that the Navy is claiming that we invented this? That's what they're claiming in this patent.
Yep. But no, the Navy didn't, and they'd have to because that's the only way you could get the patent is you have to be the originator of it.
Oh yeah, it cannot be pre-existing technology.
It's pre-existing
and you have to file.
Technology.
I think it's within 1 year of you discovering the technology.
Good.
Okay, what about you need to address the conspiracy theorists out there that are going to say that Mike Turber is on here on a disinformation campaign. These are actually extraterrestrial beings that would freak the population out if they knew that we've been visited. So let's instead leak out information that nothing to worry about, everyone. This is U.S. technology.
You have any tinfoil? The situation with that is I have a lot of respect for a lot of conspiracy theorists. Okay, and I have a lot of friends that are conspiracy theorists, and we go about bouncing things back and forth all the time. It's a lot of fun because it opens up your mind and makes you think of things you otherwise would not think about. So that part's pretty cool. The problem here is that if they're going to look at this as some crazy mind game that the government's paying me like I'm a shill or whatever it is, that every month or so they come up with a different name for me, which a lot of them probably can't say here, as to why it is that I keep getting this information and get this information out, and is someone paying me? Like you had one of your episodes you started, who is Mike Turber? Blah blah blah. Well, the thing is that I'm a person that keeps stumbling across information. When I get the information, I put it out. I'm not going to sit there and just sit on it. If I find something, I'm going to put the information out. If it's information that's a matter of national security, maybe I have some question about it. But the thing is that this information here, a conspiracy theorist is going to take it and go, no, these are aliens. Mike is wrong. Okay, so if they're going to say that, that's fine.
Because there are lots of people, there are scientists out there that say that we're not capable of building this yet.
Yeah, and that's fine. But if they go through the same steps that I've gone through and several other people go through, you research this stuff and you go, you know what? This stuff is from the 50s, man. This is not current technology. This is technology that was developed in the 40s and the 50s. And you go back to Tesla, I mean, the original Tesla, and look at it from that standpoint. You're looking at that technology that back then, when he was putting out, everybody thought he was a wackadoodle, and they thought he was a conspiracy nut or whatever, and he had this great contraption that could send power through the airwaves to power the entire world. Well, guess what? It really did exist. And he really did make it, and it really would have worked if a lot of people would have put a lot of stuff behind it, but it would have put a lot of industries out of business too. So there's a balance somewhere that the governments like to play around with as to exactly how much technology are we going to go ahead and put out that's going to hurt our own country's infrastructure and all of the different things, the technologies and the businesses that have built up based on fossil technologies or computer technologies or chips and all that. That's the issue you're going to be faced with.
Let me ask this question. Do you think 2004 is the first time that these things were seen?
No, absolutely not.
When do you think they were first flown?
90s.
90s.
Probably
so
mid-90s.
Some of the UFO sightings that people have scoffed at before may have been sightings of this.
Could have been, yeah. Especially if they have the configuration. Keep in mind the original Aurora project, all these triangular shaped ships that we're seeing. That was a technology that's basically has been pushed away. The Aurora program was actually more than one aircraft. It was actually a series of aircraft. But they were all triangular. They actually look kind of like that you have on that diagram there. You can also do several things that utilize that technology with existing technology. If you take the forward leading edge of an aircraft's wing and you actually highly electrify it and run different chemicals around it and all this other stuff, you would effectively increase the lift of that aircraft dramatically. Now, whether or not the amount of energy that goes into it would do that, but that's effectively, I'm guessing, what some of this is around the edges, is talking about the technology of the leading edge of the object as it moves through whatever media it's moving through, whether it be through water or air or even space.
Well, for me personally, as hard as it is to believe that we have this technology and that so few people know about it, because that's really hard for me to believe. But for me, frankly, that's easier to believe than it being extraterrestrial, in part just because I just know things are so damn far away out there. I mean, things are light years away. So, this thing's traveling at a rapid speed, but it's still
look at this
hundreds of years to have come from someplace else, unless you can somehow warp space or black holes.
Which you can do. That technology is a real technology too. The closest star is Proxima Centauri. It's 4.2 light years away. The speed of light's 186,282.3976 miles per second. Okay, so
is that right, Michael? Do you have that right? The number right?
Yeah, you can check me on my numbers. I got a pornographic memory. But 186,282.3976 miles per second is the speed of light. But that speed of light seems incredibly fast. But the sun, 93 million miles away, if it blew up right now, we would not know about it for about 8.5 minutes. So to get from here to the sun at the speed of light would take 8.5 minutes. To get to the nearest star is 4.2 light years away. So it'd take 4.2 years at the speed of light.
At the speed of light.
Yeah. So if this craft was able to travel at an unbelievable speed, which I don't know what the speed limit is on this thing, or if there is a speed limit, because at the way it was moving, why would there be a limit? Why would it have a limit? What is if the air is not stopping?
Well, it's still using energy to propel it. So it would be the limits of that energy.
Be the limits of that energy based on the mass of the object that it's moving, and if less mass would probably mean the object can stay aloft longer or travel faster or maneuver quicker. So whether or not that's the case with these things, I don't know, because I haven't actually been able to study their exact makeup of their movements.
Well, what you said I think is really important to emphasize to people, and that's cool that you have those figures at the top of your head, that the closest star is 4.2 light years away. If you were traveling at the speed of light, which is theoretically impossible, it would still take over 4 years to get to the nearest star, and that would just happen to be the one that's got an Earth-like planet going around it, which is,
And it does.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Damn,
you learn
he's
something new
good
every day. It actually has a planet that's in the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is a zone around the star where a planet would be.
Okay, but
in the
Mars is in the Goldilocks zone, probably, right?
It's
The point
just,
being that
probably
there's still a long ways from that to
Yeah.
having life, let alone intelligent life,
Yeah.
on it. So then you got to go to the next star, which of course you know is how far away? The second closest star?
That would be Alpha Centauri.
Of course.
4.3.
4.3.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, not that far from.
No, it's a part of a binary. It's a part of a binary star system. So Alpha and Proxima Centauri actually are part of the same system.
So anyway, point being, stuff's far away.
Yeah.
So
You see,
in your,
I have no notes, and it's blowing his
just
mind.
to get it out on the table, do you believe that we've been visited by intelligent life?
Yes.
Are we supposed to get my reaction shot to that? What the hell
He knows
is that?
what it is.
I don't know what it is.
This is a map. This is on Voyager. It's on Pioneer. It's on any interstellar aircraft or spacecraft that has left the solar system. Effectively, it's 14 lines that are pointing to 14 different quasars, different periods on this. And this is essentially a map saying you are here. Yes, I do believe. I do believe that I don't necessarily believe we've been visited. Not necessarily. I have no evidence to support that, even though I was in a position to probably acquire the evidence to support it. I don't have it. I would love to sit here on your show. I mean, think about the stupid thing I just showed you with this, of me saying, possibly alluding to me going to the East Coast in an hour and 24 minutes, okay? So I would do that, but I wouldn't say aliens exist, okay? So there's something inside me that's a turmoil, which basically says I can believe in a lot of different things and witness a lot of different things, but I have tried. I've looked for different things that would prove to me that aliens existed and that they've been here. Now, aliens exist 100%. I have zero doubt.
That somewhere in the universe there's intelligent life.
Right. And using the Drake equation, if you actually mapped it out using the Drake equation, you would come up with billions and billions of different civilizations, because there's more stars in the visible, basically in the visible universe that we know of, or in the known universe, than there are grains of sand on this planet. Okay. So that's a lot of stars, and those stars would have planets. So the number of planets would even be more than that. But the number of planets that support life, how could we believe that we're the only one?
Right.
And these objects that we have here, do I know for a fact whether or not there was some reverse engineering of some extraterrestrial technology? No, I don't know that. I can't sit here and tell you that. There'd be no way I could do that. But I can say that the technology that's in them is made by us. It's not like we took a craft and took the power unit out of it and said, okay, let's put it over here and let's figure out how to turn it on. And oh my God, we turned it on, and now we're darting around the planet at 24,000 miles an hour.
But you don't have any evidence to point to that we have been visited.
Glad you mentioned that. No, I'm just kidding.
Now, you notice I didn't react to that.
No, you knew better. You got my number now. No.
You have a belief that it's certainly possible.
Absolutely.
But in all of your years of looking and investigating and searching and seeking, you've never seen anything that you would point to and say, you know what? I think that was...
I've seen some pretty crazy stuff, stuff that I could never actually mention at all. But in all of my endeavors and looking around and trying to find one thing, and while I'm looking over here, I'm like, yeah, I need to go check out this file. Okay, while I'm in the area where other things would be, I would look, and nothing. And even saying that is a stretch, because who am I to be able to look into an area to look at one thing and to be able to see something else? Because they would have that so buried somewhere, so drastically away from me that my level of security clearance was very high, but it wasn't obviously the highest that you can attain, but also it's compartmentalized. So why would someone who works in this area or this field be able to look at something that would be able to prove or disprove the existence that aliens have ever visited here? I couldn't say that. I would never do that. And that's what keeps the conspiracy theorists alive, because there's no one that can say that. And it's not the conspiracy theorists or whatever. Someone that believes in aliens isn't a conspiracy theorist in my book. They're normal. Anyone that doesn't believe in them, in my book, is abnormal.
Yeah, we don't. So far, it doesn't appear that we have proof one way or the other.
Exactly.
Well, you didn't disappoint again, Mike. Mr. Parker, did I miss anything? You have any?
You told me on the phone that I thought you said that a woman called you, approached you, and you took a meeting, I believe, in Palmdale, and there were other individuals like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that the intention was to farm this information out.
Correct. There's 16 individuals. Basically, a girl by the name of Teresa, she called me, and that's actually the day when I started running around and went to the 99-cent store or whatever. That's who actually called me that day. I thought I was going somewhere a lot closer. I had no clue where I was going. Believe me, I didn't know where I was going to end up. But these individuals, there's about 16 that have various levels of knowledge or into this, and I only know 2 of them. I know of the others, but I only know 2. And so over the next few months, you're probably going to see various people coming out from different areas. They're going to come out of the woodwork, so to speak. And once they feel comfortable enough, I feel comfortable with you and you. Otherwise, to bring this information here. Otherwise, why am I not at CNN? Why am I not doing that? If I was doing this for my own good or to promote myself or to get money for it, I mean, how much do you think this interview would be able to sell for if someone went on the market and said, hey, I got some information that I can actually prove, or at least halfway prove, or at least be interesting, and sell this information? I'm not here for that. That's not what I'm about. The thing about the information coming out, they tried this in December of 2017 and failed miserably. We sat back and basically went, I don't know what happened. They literally just put UFOs on the screen, and no one cared. No one gave a shit. And I'm like, how does that happen?
As a guy who's followed this phenomenon his entire life, that's exactly what I would expect to happen.
Yeah.
Until the little green man walks in the door, everybody's like, yeah, so what? We figured that was going to happen.
Maybe he just did.
And yes, maybe it just did. So it didn't surprise me at all that happened. I remember when it happened, and only geeks like me give a damn.
Yeah.
Everybody else is like, it's just whatever, man.
Yeah.
It's just not that interesting to most people, I think. Unfortunately.
Agreed. It's not even though this technology is going to affect everyone. If we went back to 2004 and looked at the phones that were available in 2004, and then looked at this phone available today,
That's what most people care about.
People would be like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I can see that progression.
But I don't get it. Why would the Department of Defense want a bigger reaction from the public? What reaction did it want, and why?
I think what it was that they knew that there was going to be a whistleblower out there anyway, and that something was in the works, and that they decided, rather than go through that hassle of actually discrediting a person that they just paid a lot of money to come in to do that very job, why don't they just go, okay, you know what? Yeah, here's a few videos. This is what we found. We don't know what they are.
Yeah, but as you point out, they lied.
They did. Absolutely. 100% guaranteed they lied. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So they weren't really disclosing it.
No, they were basically putting it out there. And I think what it was is a testing of the waters, so to speak, to see the same way they tested the technology from one part of the military against another. They had the Air Force basically screw with the Navy. Okay, that's what happens. So you guys that are on the Nimitz thing or whatever, anyone that has an issue with that, now you kind of know. It was basically the Air Force, because the Air Force was there, and there's someone somewhere has got whatever proof that the Air Force was there. And they got that information, they brought it back, and they basically wanted to see, okay, how did our guys respond to it? Let's go get the data. The data's not going to lie. Let's bring the data here and let's see how we respond to it. And now we can take that information, extrapolate it, and sit there and put it across a different platform and go, okay, the Chinese operate this way. They'll probably respond a little differently, but they'll probably respond very close to the same way our guys did. And see, our guys were quiet for, 15 years? It's 2004. It's 2019 now. 15 years, and now we're just hearing about all of this stuff. These guys are coming out. The Nimitz, there's a documentary called The Nimitz Encounters. Mm-hmm. Those guys are, coming out. They're saying what they saw, and they don't know what it was. But hopefully, if they see this, they'll have a better understanding. I don't have all the answers, but I have some of the answers. It's a piece of the puzzle that may help them get closure or whatever it is they need to understand that, okay, what happened wasn't extraterrestrial. They're made right up the road. There's the Air Force was screwing with you, and they went down there to see exactly how you guys would respond. And that's what I would do, too. If I came out with a new technology, I'm going to test it on myself first before I start showing it to the rest of the world and screw it up.
Speaking of the rest of the world, you're saying you believe North Korea knows about it.
Well, North Korea
knows that we have it.
Oh, yeah, they definitely know that.
Does China know that we have it?
Absolutely.
Russia?
Yep.
and that's because we made sure that they knew that we had it?
No, I think we made sure North Korea knew we had it, and I think that was more of an intimidation factor. I think China knows because China's been working on the same technology for a long time, and I think China is either has it or is very close to it. I think Russia has its own internal economic issues that has prevented it from going as far as what we've done. So I don't think Russia's there yet.
Iran?
Iran, no. I don't think they have it. I think now everybody knows. After this, maybe more people, because I haven't seen a broadcast where someone actually came out and said, "But these things are." Okay, so this is as far as I know, is going to be the first time anyone is going to have an actual broadcast of someone claiming to know what they are. The problem is people are going to try to discredit me. They're going to say that Mike's a quack, Mike's a this, Mike's a that. The problem is that I have no notes. I came in here unfiltered with nothing in my hand. I'm not reading off a script. I'm telling you exactly what I was able to find, not necessarily how I found it or where, but the information it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely.
Last question, and then it's beer time, right? You got time for a beer?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
That's the only reason I came out here, man.
You earned your beer today.
He fed me beer.
Yes, Michael.
So I can tell you this.
I want to present a situation to Mike and see
Sure.
what it says. So you were called by Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
You go, I think, to Palmdale to Plant 42, I believe, is what you're saying.
I didn't that day, but I'll have to show you this.
Okay, so you go to some place.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's 13 to 16 other people there.
Yep.
I'm guessing that they asked for all of your phones. You assumed that that's so you wouldn't record or photograph the discussion, and while you had the discussion, they transported your phones to the East Coast and then back.
It's possible. But I won't know what that scenario actually would play out to be, or how that would make sense to someone other than you and me.
Right.
Because in a few minutes you're going to have a much better understanding of what he saw earlier.
Okay.
Because you weren't privy to that, so that'll probably change your complete thought process here in a few minutes.
Yep.
We'll do that over a beer. That way I can claim that I was drunk when I showed it.
Yep. Doesn't look like that's what happened to me. All right, my friend, let's go have our beer.